None.
I know what's going to happen.
After the
Anyway, no, this is
surrender.
actually a fascinating subject. We will pick it up later.
On the bar.
On the subject, India,
Yeah.
we had actually 2 stories there.
Yeah, there was Company Men by Christopher Weber. It appears in Gazette 2 a long ways back, where he had Mughal representatives, an embassy of sorts, arrive in Grantville. And then many years later, in the draft that he first drafted working on now, Chuck Gannon actually went back and is using those characters in the Papal Stakes. They're very, very prominent. The Englishman, anyway, north. So that story of Christopher's is kind of, Christopher himself has kind of vanished. I don't know.
I tried to write a story on one of the kids of the Mughal Empire, and I was threatened with death by I just want to throw that in there.
By the Maoris, right?
Well, the bar jumped on me that if I dared use one of the Mughal children in one of my stories, that I would be hunted down and killed.
Or
I just want to throw
sent
that
to
one
New
in.
Zealand. Right?
Well, Tim, discuss it with me afterwards. I mean, this
Well, no.
I mean, these things don't.
I brought it up as humor value only.
All right, fine.
You have to understand that Tim is forever writing genius children.
Genius children.
I mean, his major character is Blaise Pascal, who hangs himself by the foot from the steeple of a Methodist church. So,
There's a
you
story
never
behind
know what Tim
quite a
is going to do with bright children.
Anyway, this is not necessarily precluded. There was that story, and then what's the other one? I forgot.
My guy Shamrani, but that was set in the most politically inconsequential principality I could find. Essentially, India in this period, just visualize it geographically as being kind of an ice cream cone shape. So the top where the
Where the mountains are.
This is the round part and sort of a little U-shaped area below.
It's the Ganges Plain, goddammit.
Yeah, okay. I like ice cream. And, but you can see where my head's.
Any Hindus in the room?
The north, so that northern
It was yesterday.
group is the Mughal Empire, and the little area that's the cutout is jungle area, which they have
Bangladesh
influence in, but not really ruling. Then below that, the central third, roughly, you have, I think, 5 sultanates that are independent and are very worried about the Mughals, and one of them was actually in the 1630s in the process of being conquered by our pal Aurangzeb. And then below that, you have what is nominally, that starts with a V, and I can't remember it. Yeah, I can slur it too.
Vijayanagara. It's
Empire.
tripping right off the tongue.
But that empire is sort of being held together by duct tape, sort of political equivalent of duct tape, and there are
Not
lots of
invented
little and various principalities that formally owe allegiance to the empire, feeling more or less degrees of autonomy. And my story was set on in one of the little ones in the southwest. And of course, we also really have a third story, which is
Yeah.
Tranquebar.
Tranquebar. But the thing about Tranquebar, they go, they trade, they go home.
right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, there's only one scene in India where they're not in the fort. They go out to a bar to trade. So.
Basically, there's almost nothing in India. Actually, there is nothing in India itself.
I just want to bring up as a selling point for myself.
Subtle, Tim.
I'm not subtle. The Jacqueline Pascal, who's in the library translating for everybody, would have known the Dutch interest in all these maps. So that might be a starting point for a Japanese are coming story. It doesn't have to be me that writes it, but in other words, it's possible the Japanese are in Vietnam, or whatever Vietnam's called.
Southeast Asia.
Who are being brought by the Dutch to supposedly, I don't know about Granville, maybe Magdeburg. it's a possibility that Jacqueline would have known because the Dutch might have gone to her to get translation.
Garrett knows
You
this.
know, since you mentioned Southeast Asia, I do want to say one thing about it. Having grown up in a certain period of time, I must say that it was very interesting when I looked up a little bit when I was doing the mineral mastery articles, trying to find out, geopolitics of controlled mineral resources. So I see that there's a civil war between the Trinh in North Vietnam and the Nguyen in South Vietnam that's been going on since 1627. And this all had a rather familiar sound.
Are the Khmer still in pretty much dominance at this point?
I don't know about the Khmer. I know that Burma.
In Cambodia.
Cambodia.
Is Cambodia around or is it still Burma?
It's Khmer.
No, Cambodia and Burma are two different places.
It's
Oh.
Yeah, Burma is
Khmer
the
Empire
west of the.
is still around.
But the deal with India, you've got
All right,
literally
wait,
thousands of,
Fair warning, don't anybody touch Southeast Asia.
Oh,
don't want it. But
No
look,
Southeast Asia.
Am I a canary in the mine or something?
Tim, it's always possible, but I shouldn't say don't touch it, but just be.
Well, I was just saying for anybody else, in other words, the Japanese won't be as much, or theoretically won't be as much a surprise. Because in the book, in the article, in the story in Ring of Fire 3, it's mentioned the Dutch left the Japanese there in what is Vietnam, went back, and then came back and said, hey, we could bring you, there's things there. So it's potentially possible that Jacqueline Pascal would have overheard, helped translate, been involved with, and have that.
I think that's a potential that should probably remain. I'm
Okay. all right.
A couple of
There's
things,
no
though.
capacitor for
You
that.
do have in Ayutthaya, which was what
George.
became modern Siam, which became modern Thailand. You do have a significant Japanese involvement that Garrett Vance
He's working on.
has worked on, and that has extended to when things went west there, to other parts of Southeast Asia.
I was
But
just
really-
thinking of Jacqueline Pascal thinking she's going to become the Japanese expert and reading Shogun and thinking therefore she knows the Japanese. I just thought that would be interesting. A lot of story potential there for cultural
You
mystery.
know that you can find
Okay, you
online.
can write that
You
one.
can find online an
Just leave,
essay that's
something
like 100 pages long on what was
Wrong
the
with.
errors in Shogun.
No, I understand
What
that,
Clavel
but
did
Jacqueline
wrong.
won't know that, and she's
Hold
like,
on. The reason that Southeast Asia has to be wearable.
Oh,
You
thank
guys
you
gotta
so much.
gotta be careful about it, because what Ira and I are beginning to discuss may very well wind
Affect.
up involving a whole lot of stuff in Southeast Asia. Well, see, what's happening is the series has already entered into, you can call it a second stage butterfly effect, in the sense that most of the stories, at least novels, so far, uptimers have played a really prominent role, directly. And that is starting to change, and will very clearly change for all the readers once Kremlin Games comes out. Because Kremlin Games, there's really only one American involved. Well, two, but the other guy's a villain, and he's kind of important as triggering off the crisis. But basically,
We
one.
got to kill it.
Yeah, we get to kill him. Basically, one American winds up off in Russia early on. Now, he's played a very important role as a catalyst, but most of the characters, except for him, are all downtimers. And we're gonna be coming into an area eventually, and I can see it looming, where almost all the characters are downtimers, and the impact of the Ring of Fire is really not gonna involve Americans at all, as appearing as characters themselves.
Yeah, that's what
And
you've
the
been
story
writing.
that Ira and I have been talking about. There's no Americans so far showing up in there at all. And there's dramatically good reason to bring one in if you can, just because it tends to make the story a little bit more accessible to most of the readers. But But even if you did, it would likely be the same thing as happening with the story I'm doing, Walter Hunt, set in North America. A long series of stories that Herb's writing in what's now Canada.
It takes the Inuits out.
There's almost no, I'm trying to blank out, there's no Americans in that. So what you're getting to is a point where you're really starting to see just the impact ring of fire that's gone beyond whatever America.
Yeah, the butterfly affects everybody else. No, I'm
Yeah.
Is there any group of people I can't, right, I mean, the Inuits are now out.
Yes, there's lots of people you can't.
Yeah, actually,
write.
there's quite a few people. Look, it's always possible to write stories in areas where other people are working. You just gotta be careful how you do it. When the problems usually come in is when it gets into sort of big political issues, because that's, you know,
Going to affect other
that's
people.
gonna affect other people. If it's kept more narrowly focused around a story, what happens to them? It's a really, really big world, so it's really perfectly plausible that a bunch of different things are
I
happening.
just find all the bees nests and stick my foot in it.
Yeah, you have a talent for it, but.
One of the things that everybody forgets is that there's millions of downtimers, and each one of them has a legitimate story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has a concern that they need to deal with.
And
Anyway, yeah, hold on, wait. All right, go ahead, yeah.
I haven't heard anything about North Africa, Central Africa.
Ottoman,
Uh,
well, North Africa
We've
is.
had a bit of a hint with that story that about
I've got a North African story, but it's.
Malawi.
Oh, yeah. Wait a minute, which one? Which one?
Malungu seed, the
Oh,
malaria.
Malungu seed,
yeah,
yes.
It's a problem is I'm blanking on, yeah.
Jonathan
Jonathan
Cresswell
Jones story, but the problem is I'm blanking on it. The single most important thing that will happen or not happen in Africa will be whether or not the slave trade develops.
yeah.
The slave trade pretty well politically devastated Africa. What it did was it gave rise to a series of very powerful coastal kingdoms based on slave raiding and because they would trade them for guns. And the impact that had further inland was to destroy or rip apart the existing polities that existed further inland, which were actually more advanced. And then of course the whole, effect on the actual population. But it's kind of interesting to wonder what would happen in Africa if the slave trade had not happened.
It's already happening. That's the problem.
Yeah,
it started
Well,
before
yeah,
we.
yeah,
just
yeah.
started.
It's
Not
started.
just. I mean, the
Well,
sugar has been
it's
going
a-
on for a while. Ottomans have been taking slaves for 1,000 years. I mean,
Right now, yeah,
some of that has been going on.
It was at a lower level of
right.
activity.
I mean, what I'm saying is that we can't stop it at the beginning because it's not the beginning. We can stop it at a low level, but
That's not the issue. Slavery's been around for a long time and it's existed all over the world. But that phenomenon, the transatlantic slave trade,
right.
was something really,
It started with the sugar trade.
yeah, but it also went on for 2 centuries.
It did.
And it lasted a long time. It was a major trade. It had a huge political impact on Africa. Most people in the United States are aware of what happened in the New World, are not aware of what the impact was in Africa. But to go back to your question, I don't know yet. The problem is figuring out a way to make that a story. There's, by the way, a possible interesting spin-off, maybe from one of the stories Ivor will have in his volume, because a group of Ashanti figure who've been brought over